Hi, my name is Julie Fenton. I'm a pediatric speech therapist here at Cleveland Clinic, and am here and really excited to share with you guys today about some of the impacts that technology is having on our kids and their development. So we will go ahead and get started. I know that it is a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure that you guys have all the information and can, pause the video and screenshot any data or suggestions that you may want. So we'll move pretty quickly through it, but I'm excited for you to have all of this information. And I will also include some references and resources at the end on a screen that you can also look into this for more information if you need. And okay, a little bit about me. So I'm married. I have three kids who are 10, 12, and 14. And so I share that to let you know that I am in this with you guys. It's kind of a beast of a topic that we're working through and battling and just learning and researching and trying to discover what's best for our kids and how we can use this to keep them healthy and safe. I'm a pediatric speech language pathologist at Cleveland Clinic and have been for more than 18 years. And in 2018, I began research on how technology is impacting child development. And it just really blew my mind about kind of what I was seeing clinically with my patients, as well as with my own kids and with my friends' kids. So it has really given me a passion about sharing this information with people so that we can make wise choices for ourselves and for our families. So just an important side note before we begin, technology offers so many benefits and is just really a gift to the gifts and talents people have been given. And so I'm not suggesting that all technology is inherently bad. I'm not saying you have to throw away every screen in your house and never use it, but I really do think, especially based on the information and research coming out, that it is really important for us to be informed about the effects of technology so we can make decisions that ensure that it's used in ways that are beneficial for us and for our kids, especially as they grow. Another important note is that for children with significant special needs, we know technology is an amazing benefit and has a beneficial role for things like communication and learning and accommodations. And so while we still have to monitor and keep track of their screen time as well, its impact and use is different in these cases. So this is not the kind of use I'm talking about. So if your kids have a tablet that they use with an app for communication or, adapted programs for typing and things, that is not what today's information is about. This is just the impact of kind of more recreational and constant use of technology. So question of the day, is this screen time exposure problematic? Well, we all know the feel and the pull it has on our lives. I think, I know as an adult, I feel the need to kind of check it frequently and see if I've gotten any notifications posted. And so we now know that there are decades of evidence showing that screen time is habit forming. So all the way back in 2009, 1 in 11 kids ages 8 to 18 were considered addicted to technology. And I think just the crazy part about that statistic is that never before in human history had there been a diagnosable childhood addiction. And so we know just the trouble with the screens and the impact it's having on development is continuing to increase. And so we're going to talk about a lot of the studies that are coming out and the impact that that's having. And I want to just mention screen time and technology is like the addiction component is not yet a formal diagnosis, but professionals are seeing the same symptoms in excessive screen use as in other addictions. So when you take away that screen, they're having the same withdrawal symptoms and that neurological and physiological responses that they do in other addictions. So I think the answer is yes. Is it a problem? And so we're going to learn a little bit more about why. All right. American Academy of Pediatrics, their screen time recommendations, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry came out with these updated screen time recommendations in 2024. So before 18 months, there really no technology is beneficial. They say with the exception of video chatting with an adult. So like if grandma and grandpa are out of town or, big brother or sister are away at college, those kinds of things are beneficial. Between 18 and 24 months, they say limited screen time should be limited to watching educational programming with a caregiver. So having somebody with them. However, I realize the reality when my kids were little is The reason I turn on a show is I need to make dinner for 20 minutes, or I don't want to be sitting there with you while you're watching. But that's the kind of the tricky part, but that is the recommendation. 2 to 5 years old, they say non-educational screen time, 1 hour per weekday and 3 hours on the weekend days. And 6 years and older, there's not really a specific documented time frame. It's more about encouraging healthy habits and just limit activities that include screens, making sure that they're turned off during family meals and outings, and sometimes in the car when you can be talking and connecting. They encourage parents to learn about and use the parental controls, and just avoid using screens as a pacifier, a babysitter to stop tantrums. I think that is something I've seen that's become really problematic. I get it, it's easy. You need them to be quiet for a couple minutes to sit still, and so you just hand them your phone. But there's just a lot of skills and actually neurological impact that's having. And so we're gonna learn about that in a little bit. And they also recommend turning off screens and removing them from bedrooms 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime because of the impact it's having on sleep. All right, so few screen time statistics. 44% of kids under age 1 use a mobile device every single day, and by age 2, it jumps to 77%. Preschool kids spend an average of 4 hours per day on a screen. 8 to 10-year-olds or elementary age, 8 hours a day, and teens more than 11 hours a day. So it seems crazy, and it is, but kind of keep those statistics in mind as we move forward, because there's some data that we're going to come back and refer back to, but those are also kind of the frequent hours and things before COVID. So we know and like kind of through COVID, but the COVID impact, we know that it had a screen time for kids and teens, the average time per day rose by 2 to 3 hours. So add 2 to 3 hours on each of those, and that's kind of what we're looking at on most, typical teen and kid use with the screens. So it is a lot. It's crazy. All right, so we're going to take a look at all the things it's impacting, everything from parenting, several developmental changes, play, education. We're going to talk about social media, pornography, and predators. And I realize I'll pause before that last section because I realize it can be a trigger for some, but I do think there's a lot of important information and caution we need to be taking as parents to be aware of what our kids are exposed to as soon as they're online. So impacts on parenting. All right. This is the first generation of kids with digitally distracted caregivers. So we know, and I'm guilty of this too, little ones pulling, mom, pulling at you, and you're on your phone checking or finishing a text or reading an email, and kind of just a minute, you're kind of putting them off. So we know that more screen time use by caregivers means fewer adult and child interactions, and just, more distracted adults. And just that kind of distraction that pulls us away from those connected times with our kids. There was a study came out in 2021 about infant stress hormones increasing when the caregiver is on a screen. So if you think about, you're normally feeding that baby, and there's that 12 inches or so from your eyes to theirs, and you're gazing at them and talking to them and singing to them, or maybe sleeping because you're exhausted, but just that sweet time. And if you think about now, parents are over here off to the side looking away from the baby and not making eye contact and not connecting with them. And so that decreased connection, they found the stress hormones are increased on babies when they're not having that connection with a caregiver. So we know literally from birth, the impact of screens are impacting development on these little ones. And we know, more caregiver connection and involvement just equals better all around development for our kids. And so I know, that's all of our goal for the kids in our lives that we love and care about. And so it's important to just kind of think about how we're using them. So the other interesting part in the research is that they're showing a drastic increase in using screens as what they're calling digital babysitters. So they're used to calm, entertain, eliminate boredom, avoid conflict. And it's true. It is so true. I totally get it. It's easier now because you get, they're quiet for a couple minutes. You get to do what you want to do. However, there are significant long-term implications to consider. And we're finding that these kids have increased difficulty with self-regulation, with tolerating being told no, And part of that is because when you're on this little screen, it's all about you, right? I'm watching what I want. I'm controlling the game. I quit if I lose. I don't want to read this, so I scroll away and I finish. I. And it's just focused on that. They're not required to interact with anyone. They're not required to deal with the frustration and things that come with real life interactions. And so they're finding when these little ones are on these screens and kind of that neurological development in that way, their whole childhood, we're finding increased anxiety and depression in later years because they're not used to handling difficulty in the younger years. So it's just creating a sense of entitlement and this kind of need to always get what they want. So I encourage you, and I say none of this to make you feel guilty at all, because I've done years of analyzing how I spend my time and parenting with my kids. And so, but I would encourage you, take a moment just to kind of ponder how you use screens and think about what your use looks like, and just keep an open mind as you process the rest of this information. This is a great time to just pause and think about how you can apply the information that you hear and learn tonight, and just to use things maybe in a wise way and make, could be big changes, could be small changes in your family, but just to use and apply the information we learn and how that would benefit your family and your kids. All right, impact on child development. Excuse me. Okay, neurological concerns. So we know the reason these little glowing screens are so appealing is they activate the brain's pleasure center. And that is an increase in the dopamine levels. So dopamine is that feel-good brain chemical. So when you pick up that phone and there's a notification, there's this little, they call them dopamine squirts, this little like release of dopamine that's like, ooh, I like that. That feels good. I want more of that. And so, I know if we know as adults, we feel that pull and we feel that draw and that kind of addiction to our phones and our screens. We have brains that are fully developed, right? The brains are fully developed in mid to late 20s. And so if it feels addicting for us as adults, what is that going to look like for our kids with still developing brains, right? Their brains are still developing all those pathways. And so what is that going to look like? And it's scary actually. Kids who are addicted or, have that big significant draw and time on screens have brains that are imaging in the same as cocaine addicts. So when they're doing all the neuroimaging and the studies on these kids, their brains are literally lighting up the same as a drug addict. And so we know it is having that big of an impact on their development. And so it is just something we need to be aware of and monitor and do hard work to really set limits and boundaries to make sure that they're using these things in healthy ways. All right. Of course, my area of specialty is the speech and language delays. So we know increased screen time is linked to lower receptive and expressive language scores, even with the TV in the background. So even just a place where there's a TV on all day, kids are understanding, having lower understandings of language and using language less than they used to. And they think that's often just because there's not as much conversation happening when the TV or when the screens are on. And so there's just less language and learning happening with the kids. For each additional 30 minutes in a daily mobile device use, it's associated with increased odds of an expressive speech delay. So every 30 minutes of using, a phone or a tablet per day is increasing the risk of expressive speech delay. And we know language learning occurs best when it's tied to a multisensory experience, and screens, in case you haven't figured out, are not multisensory. They're just one-dimensional, two-dimensional, just that image on the screen. So that means, babies who are learning, you can show them a picture of this banana on a screen and they might, see this yellow-shaped, oblong-shaped object, but that's just one area of exposure. So versus if, they're eating and mom or grandma or dad or babysitter, whoever gets out a banana for lunch and look, you're having a banana, let's open it. Ooh, you get to feel it, you get to smell it, you get to taste it, you get to squish it in your fingers, and just how much more of a rich multisensory input that is to the brain, and how much better language is learned that way, not just in this single screen input kind of way. Something else that I see just personally and clinically is just a huge decrease in the ability to cope and self-regulate, to learn self-control, learning to self-soothe and to wait. Everywhere we go, there's kids, whether it's in the waiting room at work or at the grocery store or at a restaurant, and, you plop the kids down, put the screen in front of them, and headphones on even. And so it's just, if you go somewhere like a doctor's office, grab a book or grab a sticker page or something, play I Spy, all those things that just let their brains kind of settle for a minute and learn to, yeah, this is kind of boring. It's kind of hard for me, but I'm going to push through. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to keep myself calm and be patient. And so when you automatically just give the screen in those moments, it just robs them of opportunities to kind of regulate and keep themselves calm and learn to do other things besides just be on a screen. Attention issues are one of the huge concerns that we're seeing. And the reason for this is rapid fire visual images is what happens on a screen. So if you think of that means if you are outside when it's dark out and somebody has their TV on in their house and you kind of see that light flashing all the time, that's that rapid fire visual image. And so I have parents tell me often, my kids, they won't play with toys for 30 seconds to a minute, but they'll sit and watch TV forever. They're so calm. Well, their bodies might be calm, but actually that constant change and flash and movement and all the different things on the screen is actually overstimulating their brains. And it puts them into this fight or flight mode. And so that's why when you pull and then you say, oh, guess what, Johnny, it's time to be done on your screen, and you take it away and they lose their minds, that's because their brains are so overstimulated, they can't get themselves calmed down. And it really is a neurological response to taking away that screen. So in addition, each hour of TV that preschoolers watch per day equals about a 10% higher chance of developing attention problems at age 7. So if you think back to that screen with the time statistics, preschoolers watch an average of 4 hours today. Or 4 hours per day. That's a 40% higher chance of having attention problems at age 7. Not because I'm not saying ADHD is not real, it absolutely is, but not because of that brain imbalance, just because their brains have been so programmed and overstimulated with those screens, their attention is, 40% more challenging. They'll have more challenges with that. So that's I feel like a huge red flag. The other problem that we're seeing a lot is that real life is not as interesting as visual and auditory stim from the screen. So I have a couple friends that are teachers and say they feel like they have to just do this like bells and whistles and all these, fireworks and fancy things to keep the kids engaged in a classroom. And it makes sense there because real life, when we sit and talk with friends or peers or watch a teacher or, play with a puzzle or color, those things are not as interesting. And so they really literally cannot function in real life situations because they're so neurologically bored. So that is another huge challenge. Additional things, anxiety, depression, body image. We know increased screen time and specifically social media, which we'll talk about in a little bit, are used to social media use are linked to increased anxiety and depression and body image issues and poor self-image issues. And that just has to do with the fact that when you scroll through and see all these things of things that look perfect or things that look skinny or look, any way that I would like to look, that's not real life. And so when you fill your brain, everybody always puts their best on social media, but kids don't have the cognitive ability to understand that those things aren't real and that's not how their life is all the time. And so the mental health, we're seeing this massive mental health crisis in our country, and really the world with this excessive social media and screen time use. And it starts until, when they're tiny. We know social skills are impacted, and the more time that someone spends on a screen has resulted in a decrease in functional, healthy, real life relationships. And that's in a variety of circumstances. Jonathan Haidt, this social, what is it called? Sorry, Anxious Generation book by that author there is a fabulous recommendation. I have a note for it at the end. And he just talks about young adults now are not learning this healthy back and forth. If I say something to you in real life and it hurts your feelings, you're going to feel, see your face and kind of hear that you're hurt and learn to walk through that. But when I have just a screen there and there's no repercussions or no, feedback that what I said was inappropriate or hurtful or wrong, it's really hard to develop those social skills to know and to work through hard things, right? Like if I'm offended or hurt by something, talking to you on a screen is much different than dealing with that in real life. And so They're finding even peer relationships are adversely impacted from preschool age. Even the preschool kids are just interacting differently and not as healthy ways. And they think a lot of it is from the shift from spending time playing with peers and just kind of working out your, disagreements and things as you play. When you're spending all that time on a screen, you don't get to practice those skills in real life, and it's impacting long term. There are emotional and behavioral problems. We know that more screen time is linked to lower levels of understanding emotion, and that again has to do with you just aren't interacting in real life, and so you're not understanding how those emotions apply. And this specifically was interesting for kids who have TVs and screens in their bedrooms. And so that's a huge recommendation that we do not allow that for various reasons, but that is one of them. There's also increases in aggressive behavior and reported problem behaviors. And they're finding that exposure to violence, especially from an early age in some of these violent video games and movies, is leading to aggression and desensitization to violence and just a lack of sympathy for the victims, and particularly in children. So you don't understand that when I blow up these people in a video game, if I actually did that in real life, there would be implications. It doesn't make me a hero or this rock star in this success in defeating this game. It's actually, there are real life implications to that. And so I'm not saying at all or implying that if your kids play those video games that they would, commit a school shooting or a crime, but there is research done that shows most of the people who have committed school shootings and violent acts like that, they are exposed to violent video games and movies and videos and things from an early age. So there is a link to that. Other concerns, things like childhood obesity, and that just makes sense, right? If you're sitting on a screen, you're not moving your body. And so there's other health issues associated with that lack of movement. There's also disrupted sleep, both in quality and duration. They're finding if greater time that you spend on mature video games is linked to reduced sleep duration, and that makes sense, right? It's scary. I don't want to play these things and see these things and then try to go to sleep. And recommendations are that screen time should be limited, especially during and before bedtime hours. So no phones, no screens ever in rooms, for multiple reasons. Things like exposure to different things online as well. But just to let your body and that melatonin set in, let your brain decompress and calm and get into good, healthy sleep rhythms is important. There is a lot of physical changes, things like text neck, where there's back, neck, and arm pain and trouble. And that's actually because when you're on a screen, your head is tipped downward. And so there's changes in spinal curvature and things from the excessive use in the screens. And actually, a family friend of ours has talked about, he's a recruiter for the military, and he said he can't believe the decrease in physical strength in these young kids that are coming into boot camps and things that used to be, the greatest, most in shape and healthy age and at that age. And now they come in and can't really pass. There's a greater number of young people who can't pass a basic physical fitness test. And he's just kind of amazed by that, and has said he feels like it's a link to increased screen time as well and lack of physical activity. There's also things with psychosis that's called something called a game transfer phenomenon. And this is crazy, but because these kids are on screen so long or play video games so long, they often have involuntary sensations, thoughts, actions, or reflexes related to the game, and that can be hours or days after playing. So I've had that happen, right? You have your phone in your pocket and you're like, oh, did my phone just vibrate? That feels weird. But they were talking about kids who play some of these video games where you build different things and playing these characters, that they actually started seeing the real world that looked like blocks from Roblox or different characters in different games, that people start to look like that, which is scary, that's how programmed and overstimulated their brains are. So why are these changes a problem? I had a parent ask me, our kids are living in a digital world. This is just how they're growing up and this is how it is. And yes, that's true. This technology is not going to go away. However, the screen time exposure is literally changing the wire of their brains, literally changing their brains. And so things that are showing up include decreased development in the frontal lobe, which is scary. So that's that frontal part of the brain where a lot of the higher executive functioning things come in, like impulse control, attention, memory, problem solving, empathy, all of those kind of higher level things that make us human. That's the part of the brain that's decreasing in development when there's excessive time on the screen. Another area is the thinning of the cortex, which I think this is crazy to me, but that's the part that kind of looks like the spaghetti on top of the brain, like all the little curvatures and things. That helps with information processing. And again, things like memory, perception, attention, sensations, and all of that. And this happens naturally to adults beginning in about their 60s due to natural aging, but now they're seeing a decreased development and a thinning in the cortex in kids who are often on screens. And that is terrifying to me. But I think a lot of this just has to do with these brain changes because they're not doing other typical childhood things. And so, we know there's trillions and trillions of connections forming neurologically from the time they're young. And so when we're not doing all these other multisensory, normal, typical play, healthy play things, it's changing our brain. That this continued activity is only forming certain pathways in our brain instead of good, healthy overall development. There's also changes in brains in the kids in teenagers who habitually are checking social media as well. All right, impacts on play. So if we were in person right now, I would ask you to raise your hand and tell me, what did you play with when you were little? So just stop and think about some of the things that maybe you played with when you were little, or what your favorite toys were. All right. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we played outside. I grew up on a dairy farm, so my whole life was outside. And even wintertime, it didn't matter what time of year. We rode bikes, we jump rope, hopscotch, sandboxes, rolling down the hills at the park, running through the sprinkler, neighborhood games where we just kind of were out until it got dark, and there weren't adults, it was child directed, adult free play, where we just made up games and figured out the rules ourselves, and had arguments and disagreements and worked through it. We played with neighbors, and a lot of risky play, right? Climbing trees, sledding. I laugh because I asked my mom a while ago, we used to go play in the woods. We had 80 acres in the immediate part of the farm I grew up on. And I asked my mom, like, well, we went back and climbed in. I mean, I was little, like 7 or 8. We go climb in the trees and play. And what if I would have fallen or broken my arm or hit my head? What would you have done? You would have never known for hours because we were out there playing for so long. And she looked at me and she's like, well, you didn't. So it was good and healthy and risky. And yeah, sometimes we got hurt, but we survived and it was good for us, made us stronger. So I just thought that is just funny how things have changed. We also watched Saturday morning cartoons, right? There was no on-demand, constant streaming, and we were indoors, played board games and all kinds of fun with real, toys that didn't make noise or have music or electronic batteries. All right, what's changed? So now in the digital age, ride on Power Wheels, play on all these gaming systems, a lot of adult-directed enrichment activities, watching TV, DVDs, Netflix things all day, every day, no stopping. It's just constantly scrolling and coming out. The one show stops, the next one starts. Lots of organized sports, clean, sensory, deprived. Making a mess is not great, and indoor play are a lot of sitting activities. And now it used to be we thought outside was safe. Now a lot of play has shifted to inside. We have formal play groups and just kind of not overprotective, but kind of just what they term this helicopter or lawnmower caregivers, which kind of means we just hover and kind of don't let the kids figure it out. We help them with all their conflicts and all the risky play and making sure they're safe and helping them solve problems. And so, not that that's always bad because we want to keep our kids safe, but it just kind of robs them of the opportunity to figure out some of these things on their own and give them a confidence and a competency that, yes, I can do these things. And yes, I am strong and I am smart and I can figure this out. And so it just has kind of shifted kind of compared to the ways that we have grown up. So screen time and play. What is play? It is how kids learn. Is how they learn. It has to be multisensory, self-motivating, and fun. That's the best part, right? And so screens are replacing these opportunities for learning through creative free play. And so we want multisensory, right? We want to be able to feel these toys in our hands, see what happens when we throw them across the room, build things up and have it fall down and help, I'll be frustrated, but I get to work through that frustration and learn that way. And so just the screens are taking away a lot of these opportunities for that multi-sensory play. And there's just so much more, like there are things you can learn on a screen. They're good for like flashcards and, sight words and things. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but there's so much more learning that happens in play. And really these glowing screens are just really limiting the best kinds of learning for our kids. Changes in play. Okay, let me see. I want to show you this cute video. Hopefully it'll work. Let me see how it worked when I tested it, but let's watch this for a second.
When you were a kid, what did you do for fun?
So we'd go blueberry picking, for instance. That's so cute. But it was true.
We grew watermelons, plantains.
I found an old sign which was big enough for me to sit on and made a great toboggan. It was very slick and very fast.
I had a few fish in my basket, and I looked up on this bluff, and here's this black bear sitting there watching me. If he starts chasing me, I'm going to keep throwing the fish out of my basket until he's gorged and he won't bother me.
And what did you like to do for fun?
You go door to door, get a group of kids, and you play lots of games, hide and seek, just going out to the field and playing baseball.
And we build these massive forts, the kind that you can actually sit in and play in, with our friends. And it was just really wonderful.
So what do you like to do for fun?
Video games, definitely.
I like to go on my phone,
text, some email.
My favorite thing to do in the world is definitely watching videos and playing video games. Those take up so much of my time.
3 hours or 3 to 4 hours a day. Same.
5 hours straight.
Just last week, I watched 23 episodes of a TV series in less than 4 days.
I forget. I'm in a house, I have parents, I have a sister, I have a dog, I just think I'm in the video game, I completely get lost. I would die if I don't have my tablet.
Whenever I feel upset, I'd play video games and I'd feel normal. It's really wonderful.
When your daughters grow up, your great-great-grandkids, what do you think will happen if this trend continues?
It's scary to think that they'll never have to leave the house.
Cindy grew up doing a lot of the things that I did and enjoyed, and I see what my grandsons are doing today, and it's mind-boggling.
By the time they have kids, it's going to be a really different environment.
I actually feel a little sad because I feel like he's missing out on what's out there in the beautiful world.
That special connection with nature, I think it's innate in all children, but needs to be nurtured.
Let's see if I can get back from. All right. So I just love that good summary of how things have changed and just that connection, with nature and real toys and things that is so important for us to develop in kids. All right, so good news out of all of that. There's some really awesome research coming out that's showing that play is an effective counterbalance to this screen, all of the screen time. So we know that play improves cognition, physical development, social skills, peer relationships. And I love this one specific study that showed that kids who have more time with peers or siblings or any people in real life were less likely to have developmental delays than kids who spent that time on a screen. So I just think that's so awesome and such great evidence that the best development happens in real life. Play also improves executive functioning skills. So again, that's those higher level skills like attention, problem solving, memory, impulse control, empathy, emotional regulation, and all of, there's so much good. So I'm so thrilled to see that. I think we had this shift kind of as a society that we felt like we had to push all this academic and the structured play and all these things. These kids need to learn and all these things early, but no. Like it's showing that play is not a waste of time. It's not frivolous. It's not just something that is kind of, a waste. but it just might save our children. So I'm just super excited to see that research is coming and that we're kind of getting back to that. So how kids play matters, right? No screen will ever be an adequate replacement for interactions in real life with a live, responsive caregiver, teacher, sibling, friend, parent. And I love that. We have to remember that how they play matters, and that also kids need help balancing this, right? If it was up to one of my children, they would spend every day playing video games all night. Who cares about eating or school or sleeping, And so it's our job as parents to help facilitate this and help them make sure that they're managing things well. And I just think boredom has become a lost art. Let's let them be bored. This is where creativity begins. And this is where some awesome things and great ideas and, who knows what they'll think of during this time. And that'll impact the future and inventions and just different ideas and things. And I know it can be pesky for us as parents, that kind of, for my kids, it would take about 20 minutes. I'm so bored. One, I offer more chores to do around the house, and that usually kind of nips that. But sometimes if I would just take some time and get out, like, here's some Legos, here's some Lincoln logs, here's magnetiles, let's build a fort, and just give them, prompt them in one way. Some of the coolest ideas they've ever had have come out of these times when they've been whining about being bored. So it really is good for them, and really good for their neurologically, for their brains to kind of settle as well and not be entertained instantly all the time. So I would encourage you guys, some best toy options. It's now January, but I talked to a lot of my patients' parents before Christmas, and they were asking, what are the best toys to promote development? So things, my single greatest suggestion is things with no noise or batteries. And I know it's really hard to walk through a toy aisle these days and find something that doesn't have noises or play music or batteries. But the problem with that, especially when the kids are tiny, is that if those toys are talking and making all the noise for them, for example, a farm toy, when I push a button and it says moo, well, then I don't have to make the cow say moo. So it's great for either just take the batteries out of those toys, or when they batteries run out, just, oh, it's broke, sorry, we can't fix them, you'll have to play with it. You get to make the noises with your voice and share your ideas. So things like books, blocks, cars, bubbles, dolls and puppets, Legos, magnetiles. My kids still love magnetiles, pots and pans, puzzles, board games, blankets to build forts, of course, water play. I know it can be tricky in these cold winter years, well, it feels like years in Cleveland, but months. So I would just throw a blanket down on the floor or a towel and a little container of water, and they could wash their car, like Matchbox cars, or there's just all kinds of options. Playing in the sink with water. My kids always loved that. Tracing paper, markers and crayons, baking supplies with grown-up help, or pretend play, but they can also help you bake really from a really young age. Cardboard boxes, you can color on them, make forts and houses for your animals or yourself if they're big enough. So just some really awesome kind of back to basics ideas that just promote so much healthy, good, strong brain development. So if you need more ideas on how to play, just Google search creative ways to play with fill in the blank toy. So creative ways to play with cars, creative ways to play with blankets, and they have some really cool things that will come up. Pinterest is also great for this. Depending on your kid's age, you can just search on there for different activities and ideas. You can also just give your kids these things and see what they come up with for creative ideas. So the possibilities really are endless and fun. All right, we're going to touch briefly on education, because I know this has been a hot topic and just is a lot of questions that I get from parents about this too. So technology in the classroom. So supporters of technology will report increases in visual spatial awareness and word recognition. And so that can be true, right? There are, again, some good parts of that, like math facts or word recognition and things, kind of some of those drill, like more memory type activities. However, there is no evidence that it actually helps them become better learners. And so we're now seeing, I'm so excited about some of these schools shifting back to, we're not allowing the phones in school. We're limiting the tablets and the laptops and things, because they're actually finding behaviors and challenges and exposure to things on the screens that are not healthy. Just having those screens present in school is causing way more problems than it's worth. And so I'm thrilled to see some of the schools coming out, and some of the students aren't happy about it at first, but just the feedback even from the kids about not having the pressure to have that phone in school is actually making them much healthier and happier. So we again we have to teach our kids how to think and learn before we introduce technology. Technology is a great thing, and it's absolutely beneficial and great when we use it as a supplement to education, not as a replacement for education. I read another article, the reality is for all the computer programming and the technology based careers that are now, it's all changing so quickly. So we really need to teach our kids how to think logically, to think deeply, to think well. Because the technology now that would be in a career, by the time they get there, it's going to be completely different. So if we teach them how to use their brains and think well, they'll be able to adapt no matter what career and what technological advances are in place by the time they get to that point to choose a career. Another couple statistics about technology in the classroom. So having phones present in school, they found an academic decline by 6 to 14%. And that's just having them present, not even having them on. We know adult eye contact is now only 30 to 60%, and it's 60 to 70% needed for emotional connections. So just if the kids are looking down at their screens in the class all the time, if they're, doing work on a computer, teachers aren't able to see okay, everybody looks like they're understanding, we can move on. Or, this Johnny needs help with this Susie's not quite getting this, we need to cover this more. It's really hard for the teachers to really have a good connection with the kids and see and interpret how everyone's doing. We know that text read on a paper is comprehended better than read on a screen, and also notes taken by hand have better retention than if you type them on a computer. And again, I really think that's just that multisensory input. It's just better. There's a ton of research finding out our brains just process things better off of a screen. There's also decreased attention and social interactions with the phone present, even if the kids are not on them. It's just that constant distraction thinking about, have I missed a text? Have I missed a snap? Have I missed a post? Have I missed a DM? So they're just constantly distracted and just aren't fully engaged in the relationships right in front of them. Something called illiteracy, which is, again, back to the decreased attention spans from all of this time on screens. Teachers are finding there's really a decrease in the ability for the students to attend while they're reading information. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that they, think about it, we all do. You read things in short snippets. I read a tweet, I read a short post, I read a summary of an article. Oh, I read, part of the article, but not the whole thing. I've lost attention. So we're consuming all of our information in short snippets on social media and websites, and it's really inhibiting this ability to think deeply for long periods of time about the information that we're reading. And so it really is, to me, it's scary, the implications that this is going to have in this upcoming generation and for careers and just where we are in society kind of as a whole. And ironically, there's something called Waldorf schools where they use limited to no technology. And there's often Silicon Valley professionals who design this technology and send their kids here because they understand dangers of the technology that they're creating, which I feel like is an interesting ethical dilemma, but that's a whole nother topic. There is a school on the east side of Cleveland, I found that's a Waldorf school, but they are finding these kids are having so much more success. So they do use technology, but it's things like word processing and researching papers and things, but not until late high school. And so everything is done without screens, and they're just having a huge amount of success with this. So I think there's some schools starting to pick up on this and realize that trend is really good. All right. Social media. So we're going to touch on, all right. My husband makes fun of me, but years ago when I started all this research, I said, I am telling you this screen time and social media, all of this is going to be like smoking was and tanning beds. We just didn't know how bad it was for you, and now until we knew. And so when the Surgeon General came out in 2023 with his statement, he was like, you were right. Children and adolescents on social media are commonly exposed to extreme, inappropriate, and harmful content. And those who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media face double the risk of poor mental health, including experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety. This is deeply concerning as a recent survey of teenagers showed that on average, they spend 3.5 hours a day on social media. And so that's just crazy to me that we know, we cannot deny that the social media impact, the impact on mental health is just terrible and so alarming. Then in 2024, this past summer, the Surgeon General called for a warning label on all social media due to the negative and addictive impacts it has on children. And so they're calling for legislation to kind of, keep these kids safe online. And so there are some states who are beginning to implement things and legislation coming and things, but it is such a massive undertaking. And so there's a really long way to go. So I just think that we as parents have to educate our kids about the dangers. We have to put boundaries and seek, things in place for them. They may not like it, but which just now that we have this information and we know, it's our responsibility to apply it and make sure we keep them as safe as possible. If you take nothing else from today regarding social media, just know kids' brains are not neurologically capable of handling the responsibility and implications of using social media from a young age. They are not. We know that critical thinking skills do not fully develop until over age 25. And so, yes, there are age restrictions on apps for a reason. Instagram and a lot of the Twitter, all of those things are I think 13 is what they say, 13 and up. So, it's just interesting. I had one little girl tell me she was 8 and she's like, well, we just lied about my birthday. And so, it's alarming that there are age restrictions on those. And if you're, no relationship that starts with a lie is a positive thing. And so we just need to make sure that we're protecting those kids and really, really thinking about what this is doing to them mental health wise and just developmentally. And, kids now have a quantifiable approval rating for the number of likes and shares and follows. And that's just a really hard thing to manage. My heart breaks for these kids because not only do you have a physical image that you have to maintain, as if that's not hard enough through those preteen and teen years, you now have this digital image that you also have to maintain. And so it's just a lot to handle. Teen suicide rates from 2010 to 2017 increased 56%. So smartphones came out in 2007. Social media and smartphones became the norm around 2010. So that first significant age of kind of becoming more normal and more household, household names and things. That suicide rate jumped during that time, and my heart breaks so much because the girls ages 10 to 14 were the area of greatest increase. And it just makes me so sad that was such a negative impact on those sweet kids. Ironically, tic disorders developed in teen girls related to increased times on TikTok during COVID. I know this is crazy, but it's true. And they think it's because, and this actually covers a variety of conditions, but what happens is because we now know those algorithms in those apps program and if your kids click on one thing that's linked to one topic, it will feed them top things on all of these topics. So there were some girls that had started watching other girls with tic disorders and they literally developed them psychologically themselves. And so it is just crazy. They think it has to do with the excessive amount of exposure and exposing yourself to those things several hours a day when your brain's still developing, and that they're taking on those attributes as well. It has to do with there's some eating disorder and other topics and things that are of similar concern. We know college students are 40% less empathetic than they were 20 years ago, and they think that's again really linked to the relationships that there's more time spent online and less time spent in real life relationships. And so it just is resulting in shallow relationships online and offline in real life. Mental health impacts from social media. We know there's chronic sleep loss, and this because these kids, if they have their phones in their rooms, especially, they're up all night. They're showing some studies of these kids getting only between 2 and 3 hours of sleep because they feel like they have to constantly keep up with all of the snaps and all the contacts be available all hours of the night. So we know sleep loss is linked to negative cognitive ability, decreased school performance, decreased social and emotional functioning. There's increased mental distress and self-harm and suicidal thoughts from excessive social media use. And these last three, Facebook depression, social comparison effect, and hyper networking. This study was done on the Facebook platform, but they're seeing the same effects no matter which social media related platform it has. But ironically, the more friends you have on an app, the more likely you are to be depressed. And again, we think because online friends are not real friends, they're not really there for you in real life. That's not the same, it's not the same community and connection as a real life community. The social comparison effect, the longer people spend on social media, the worse they feel. And I know this is true. I don't know how many of you, if you were in person, I would ask, how many of you feel better after scrolling for 30 minutes on your phone, right? Nobody really does. You just often feel worse. Hyper networking. So kids who spend more than 3 hours per day on social media, and remember the Surgeon General's statement that kids are now averaging at least 3.5 hours on social media. They are more likely to have tried sex, have 4 or more sexual partners, have used illegal drugs, and have been in a physical fight. And so again, it's just a wide variety of impacts that it's having. There's also cyberbullying is a huge, heartbreaking problem, but we know, there was a girl in 8th grade when I was in 8th grade who used to say terrible things to me every day at school. But guess what? When I left school, so did she. She didn't follow me home. She didn't stay in my pocket. She didn't constantly haunt me. And so that's not how it works. It's now constant. It's public. Everyone else can see what's happening. And there's no delete button. You can't make it go away. And so it's a very real, significant problem. And it's causing significant mental health issues, even self-harm and death. And so there are groups of parents who are battling these social media companies to hold them accountable for the harm done to their kids due to algorithms that are programmed into the apps. But it's a massive battle. And so we've really just got to take this responsibility in training our kids and teaching them and absolutely keep the legislation and stuff going. But we just, I think this battle and all of these issues starts in our home, and we have the privilege of being able to help our kids learn from an early age how to help manage all of these things. Sexting, by definition, is sending, receiving, or forwarding any sexually explicit material, message, photo, or image between digital devices. And it is illegal in most states for kids under the age of 18 to send or to receive. And the crazy part about that to me is that if somebody sends you an image, you don't have an option to deny it to see if you see that it's inappropriate. And so it can be, there's legal implications happening for possession of child pornography is what that's considered if they're receiving that. So 1 in 4 teens report having sent a sext, and 1 in 7 report having received one. And so again, the long-term consequences for college, careers, and relationships, and just so many of these activities and things that the kids are doing in these teenage years, they are not able to fully comprehend what implications that will have long term. And so it's really tragic seeing what some of these things that are happening to the kids. A side note on that too, if your kids do receive something that's inappropriate, the best thing that you can do is teach them to put it down and to tell someone, but not to delete it, because they need you don't delete it if it comes in. They need proof of if law enforcement ever were to get involved. And so there's ways and good suggestions on that in some of the resources I have, but that's just an important side note. Okay, predators and pornography. So I am aware of the sensitive nature of this topic, and I'm not offended at all. Obviously you're not in person, but I've had people step out when we're in person presenting. And so it's okay. I know that this can be a sensitive topic, but I do think it's really important to understand the dangers of what's happening to our kids anytime that they're on a screen, no matter what age they may be. So predators. Most parents largely underestimate the dangers of online predators. The average predator has 250 victims in their lifetime, and it begins in apps like Instagram, and then they groom kids over to apps like Snapchat, where the evidence more easily disappears. More easily, obviously. It never fully goes away. Nothing ever does, but it's more easily hidden, I guess. Bark is an organization that created fake profiles, and here's what happened. So they created this Libby, quote unquote, a mom. It was a mom. You had to be 18 because to be able to do this legally. So they made her look really young. So they dressed her like they created an account with all the, the selfies and the language and the terminology that they fake, like a 15-year-old would use. Within the first hour of her profile being posted, 7 adult men had contacted her, and by the end of the week, 92 men had contacted her. And their contacts ranged from inappropriate comments and threats to requesting and exchanging explicit videos. And so it is just, I think we just don't understand the dangers of what happens. And, you know, I think it's fun. And even the innocence of our kids is not, you know, intended to be inappropriate, but just you're opening them to these predators when you put their profiles out there. They tried and switched then to an 11-year-old, and within 1 minute, she was sent an explicit picture, and in 5 minutes, an explicit video. And so it is just disgusting to me that this is what happens. And so just how dangerous that is and damaging to kids, and they're often, you know, scared to share and tell what happened. The predators often will ask grooming questions like, where are your parents? Or I'm a teacher. I help lots of kids to kind of desensitize them. And those explicit images are coming in, and again, to desensitize them to the abuse that would come with that exposure. Regarding pornography, the average age of first exposure is now 9 years old and getting younger by the day. In 2019, so before COVID, pornographic websites received more traffic than Amazon, Twitter, and Netflix combined, which is mind-blowing to me. 27% of unfiltered online video content is pornographic. And so I had one presenter that I saw said, you know, when we were little, my parents had magazines out on the coffee table, and that would be like one of 4 of them being explicit. And you say, oh, we're going to put these out. We just hope the kids don't pick the inappropriate one, you know, without any filters in place. And even with filters, it is crazy the amount of exposure that's out there. 26% of adolescents ages 13 to 17 actively seek out pornography, and this includes girls. And it is found on every single platform: Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, music apps, even Venmo. Dear family friend of ours told us about how she had a completely disgusting and inappropriate solicitation on one of her Venmo payments. And so it's literally everywhere. Medical professionals are reporting increased peer-on-peer abuse. There was a group of nurses, ER nurses in California, who could not figure what is happening. We're seeing just sexual abuse and horrible abuse coming in on these younger kids. And they did a study and kind of did some research and found that early pornographic exposure was the most common link in these kids who are hurting kids. So the gist of that is they are exposed to these things in their teenage years or from a young age. And so then they're acting out things that are happening in those videos and in that material on kids who are younger. And so it's just, just another way that it's damaging our kids and our families. 57% of kids say it's easy to see explicit material while doing homework. And that doesn't even mean that they're looking for it. It's just it's incredibly crazy how few clicks away it can be to find that kind of material. It is incredibly addictive. We talked a while ago about those dopamine surges in the brain. And so that that dopamine that comes with that, some of that, and wanting more of that, you know, designed for the adult relationships and those activities in real life relationships, is what is damaging and changing their brains. But because of that, depression is almost always experienced. It's actually stunting brain growth due to changes in the brain, again, with that dopamine exposure. And it just creates unhealthy views of intimacy and is impacting the ability to have deep future relationships. There's some kids who talk about in one of the documentaries in a second that this childhood, actually it's referenced there on the screen. The Childhood 2.0 documentary has some incredible just crazy ways that the kids talk about. They interview some teenagers and they're talk about exposure to pornography, and it's really sad. So caregivers, what do we do with all this? But I will encourage you, we need to talk to kids about this from a young age, many, many, many times. It's not just one conversation and then you feel like you're good and it's over. I just talked to my kids about it again this week, and it's just, you know, from the time they're tiny and age appropriate. And these resources here are really good resources and ways to kind of bring about that conversation. So my kids are all old enough, they know the term pornography, but when they were little, we just talked about how nobody should take pictures of your body parts that are under your bathing suit, and nobody should show you theirs, and just normal ongoing conversations, so that in our house, there is no shame. They can come to us at any time with anything that might happen. And so if you've had those conversations before, when the exposure happens, it's easier to come to you for help, or any safe adult. So there's some really good, awesome resources there that I'll reference again in the reference section. For sake of time, I'm not going to show this. This is, if you want to check out this link, it's just a video about a mom in Michigan whose boy, I think her little boy was 9, and got a text message with a pornography link in it, and just how traumatizing that was for him, and kind of what they did about that. So that can be helpful. So a few closing thoughts. All right, so a lot of information, some of it overwhelming. I know I talk fast and work through it quickly, but what can we do as caregivers? How can we love and help these kids that we love in our lives? So I just think the first thing is bring more play to your day. And so here's some strategies for just using more play throughout your day. Be animated, be interested, in what your kids are doing, follow their lead. And it doesn't matter what play looks like. You don't have to play in a specific way, or only let their imaginations run. Follow what they do, be silly. There's no wrong way to play. Often imitate what they're doing, sharing smiles and laughter, and meet their kids where they're at, literally. So if they're on the floor, you get on the floor. If they're on the couch, you get on the couch. If they're outside, you join them outside. And so just to have that connection with them. Make silly sound effects. We do this in speech all the time. Animal sounds, vehicle sounds, people sounds, like boom, boom, uh-oh, woo, woo, blow raspberries, all those kinds of things. Sing and dance. Play music often, even if the screens are not on, like the visual screen, playing music, having, books on tape, all of those things are awesome opportunities. And so singing and dancing, it adds that musicality factor and activates a different part of the brain. And so it helps with language development and helps the kids stay more regulated and more engaged. Sometimes we need to listen more and talk less. Just let the kids talk, add in, keep our words more simple and model simple language for them when they're real tiny. And remember, a toy is an object to play with. It does not have to be store-bought. It does not have to be expensive. Things like pots and pans and pillows and blankets, empty tissue boxes and cardboard boxes. You can stack them, knock them down. One of my son's favorite things when we were little, we took an old oatmeal container and I took a hole punch and punched circles in the lid and bought just drinking straws, like plastic drinking straws, for him to put the down through the oatmeal container, and he loved it. He'd put them all in, open it up, dump them out, put them all in again. So it was great. All those things can count as toys. Start with one small change. So say you feel like, oh my goodness, there's so many things in this presentation that I need to work on, but just pick one. Pick one thing that can motivate you then to make more changes. Maybe, if you have other family members in the house, kind of talk together. What's one thing that we could do? And so a simple thing, like if you're using screens 4 hours a day, try to reduce it just to 2 hours a day. Or, even if you have to step it back 30 minutes, and just talk to your kids, include them in this, and know that, we learned about this and we're going to make some changes. But I would encourage you, one change that can make a huge, huge difference is if we decrease and eliminate the use of handheld phones and tablets that go everywhere, right? So I like the term bigger is better. We know that bigger is better. So if it's on the wall, if the TV's on the wall, keep it on the wall. Watch shows up there, not on a tablet in your hand. And so if you can just kind of slowly reduce back to, we just watch shows on the tablet, or not on the screen, on the TV. You can't take it off the wall and take it with you, right? So if they want to leave, that TV stays there versus these tablets and things that go with us everywhere. And use screen time on the TV. Bring a bag, throw a bag in your car with real toys and books for when you have to wait. If you have to wait at a doctor's office, if you have to wait at a restaurant, even things in the car. Have some little fidget toys. Or my kids they used to have those sticker books that had, like, I don't know, several hundred of those little circle dot stickers. So I'd have a notebook of paper and stickers and a thing of crayons, and we'd draw, and they peel the stickers off the pages and put them on, makes picture scenes. So things like that, just replacing some of that with real life toys or books. I would encourage you just learn. I mean, if you've made it this far in the presentation, I know it's a lot, and so thank you. And just knowing about the risks of screens is where it starts. Knowing not just what's happening while they're on a screen, but what also what skills are not being developed when they're on that screen, because it literally is changing their brain development and their mental health from an early age. And so I think we have to return back to play. We have to put these limits in place. It's the best way to counteract the impacts of these screens, and really we'll see benefits long into the future from this negative impact that these screens are having. But I don't think it's too late. I think there's hope, and we can join together and make these healthy changes for all the kids in our lives. But I do encourage you to get referred to professionals and get professional help if it is a serious problem. There are psychologists and counselors and things out there who are specializing in the screen addiction and kind of the detoxing of this. And so there are some really good resources out there. If you feel like it's more than about just making small changes, I would encourage you to get help sooner than later, because the implications are long-term. So what else can you do? Stair-step kids into technology. Start with a non-smartphone. This is what we've done for my oldest. She's 14. She has a pinwheel, and there's things like pinwheel, gab phones, smartwatches. There is no internet access or social media. So she calls it not a real phone, but it actually is, because that's what it does. It calls, it texts. There's certain apps she can download on pinwheel, but it's a real phone. It's a real, I think, Samsung phone. And so it looks real, but there's not all of the, it only allows certain apps on there. So there's not the unlimited access and exposure to things. We are delaying social media in our family, and our kids all know it is to protect your mental health. Our thought right now is probably senior year of high school. We will open up some of that and try to help her manage that. I realize that's different. We're also in a community where our friends are in the same mindset. So I would also encourage you to find like-minded families who want to kind of partner with you and do that together. I do understand that's hard if your kid's the only one, really the only one, not if they just say they're the only one, but yeah, just open communication and kind of delaying it as long as possible to protect their mental health really is great. Things like setting time limits and sticking to them are important, and adding monitoring applications like Bark, Life 360, Covenant Eyes. The Griffin router is one that kind of filters all explicit content before it even gets into your house. So those are all some great resources you can Google and find out more about. And then just increase the responsibility as each child's ready. Each kid's going to be different. My kids know it's not, we don't have a set age in our house when you get to do these things. It's just when your responsibility is shown that you're ready, and we'll go from there. And partaking in screens together is a huge one. So have family movie night, do video games together as a family. So it avoids that just kind of shut off from the world, self-focused kind of use of the screens, and engage in them together. And that's a really healthy and really fun way to do that. So just kind of shifting how we use screens is also beneficial. Modeling and teaching how to be good digital citizens, knowing and following the age guidelines. Be creative in your yes, right? If we're going to say no on a lot of the screen activities, have some really fun non-screen ways to hang out in activities, to hang out and brainstorm with your kids on what they would like to do. And just include them in the conversation about why you're making these changes and these choices. Giving ourselves a break is great to kind of detox our brains and kind of calm them down. An hour a day would ideally before bed, 1 day a week or day or so, and then 1 week a year. We have yet to do that, but I've heard really awesome experiences from families who've had and just shut it all off for a year and limited it as much as possible. Oh, sorry. Also, not allowing screens in bedrooms or bathrooms, increasing caregiver monitoring, and just protecting sleep, but also just protecting the kids against, the tendency to behind closed doors like that, and alone in the dark with a phone or a tablet is really not an ideal place, just with temptation and what not monitoring. Keeping those screens in public places is really ideal. And just creating habits and activities that foster truth, beauty, and goodness with your family in real, tactile, and connected ways is really just how we're going to get to use this technology in healthy, beneficial ways. And there's really awesome things it can do. But again, we just have to be aware of all the impacts it's having and protect ourselves and our kids for this generation and generations to come. So here's some resources and information. I'm just going to flip through and you guys can screenshot. Protect Young Eyes is an awesome, awesome website. They have parental controls literally for every digital device. So if you see on the screen there, there's a tab that has parental controls. You can go through and find, it'll bullet point how to share and set up all of the parental controls on an app. It gives you ratings on them, and they do awesome work. They're also doing legislation for protecting kids with on devices and all of that. It's Chris McKenna. I know at that organization, he's fabulous. Fight the New Drug is a really awesome resource if there's some porn exposure, struggles, and just they have a really awesome research and resources for help if that's an area that's needed and what to do when your kids are exposed. This is a must-see documentary. This is fabulous. Not definitely not for with kids around. Maybe later high school aged kids after you watch it. But it's called Childhood 2.0 and is just a fabulous, mind-blowing documentary about the implications of all of this technology. And ironically, I know, but you can find it on all those platforms. There's some alternatives to a smartphone that we already talked about. And here's some books that I highly recommend. That top left one, Anxious Generation, is my favorite resource right now. It is absolutely incredible. The research that is there and the practical ways that he talks about solving it, and is really practical and doable and is a really fabulous resource. A mom hack is, I actually have that because I read it. But if you don't have time to read a real book, the audiobooks are great. I listen to them in 10 or 15-minute increments when I'm in the car or doing laundry or dishes. And so that's a great way if you don't have time to sit down and read a book, but can have, a headphone in here or there. It's a great way to do that. Screen Kids, that is my other favorite book too. That's a really short read with some really good updated data and things. But there's a bunch of other books I've read and covered as well that are all really great if you're passionate about this topic like I am. Here's a good picture books for kids. That Good Pictures, Bad Pictures is my absolute favorite. There's a junior version as well. Practical applications, ways to talk to your kids about that, and kind of gives it in if it can be an awkward conversation to bring it up, but it is a really, really awesome resource. Highly recommended. Here's a few websites that are also great. And several podcasts. I love all of these, but you can also just Google implications of technology on kids and podcasts, and there's a bunch that will come up also, but it is really great. Here's references if you need if you had any questions about a study or a research article. I'll put all these up real quick. And I think that is all. Thank you guys so much for your attention. I know it is so much information, but please, please, please spread the word. If you know anyone who would like me to come speak or share with them, reach out to our department. And it's just, yeah, I really feel so passionate about this. And the more information that we can get out, the greater it will be for our kids and for kids in future generations.